Hello friends and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to start a new playlist on LARAVEL 11. In the previous video, I started with LARAVEL 10 and I was planning to build a full application on that video, but right after uploading my video, they released version 11, so I decided to start from ground zero. I also decided to make this into its own playlist, so we will have short videos covering different topics of LARAVEL. So if you haven't watched that video, you're not missing anything, but I still recommend watching it because you will have a better grasp on what is different between the older versions and this LARAVEL 11. They actually simplified this version, which is quite easy for us to work with. So we are going to start with installation. On the installation page on LARAVEL documentation, if we go to creating a LARAVEL project, we have the composer command that will create a project for us. We could use Docker as well, but I prefer using composer, which I think it's easier. So in order to install the project, we have to make sure that we have PHP and MySQL. And I'm saying MySQL because I'm going to use MySQL. They actually changed the default database to SQLite. So if you don't want to use MySQL, you don't have to, because LARAVEL by default will use SQLite. But for this particular playlist, I will use MySQL, and maybe later on I will just create a separate video on how to set it up with SQLite, which is quite straightforward and easy. Anyway, for Windows users, you can use XAMPP. And of course, this comes in with Apache Server, which is necessary for your local development server. Also with phpMyAdmin, which is your database interface, and PHP itself. So if you want to watch a video on how to install XAMPP on a Windows machine, we go through this in my first PHP video. So the link is in the description. Make sure you watch that one. So that is for MySQL and PHP. And for Composer, you can go to this website, which is in the description, and press Getting Started. And you would have this section that says Installation Windows. So if you just go there, you have this executable file that you can download and install it on your machine. And I believe this will automatically add Composer to your path so you can run it from terminal. And for the Mac users, I recommend using Homebrew. So if you are on Mac or Linux, you can just install Brew if you don't have it already, and then use the brew install command to install those three packages. So you can just say brew install PHP, MySQL, and Composer. For the database interface for Mac users, you can use this Table Plus. I personally would use the terminal itself, but if you want to have a GUI, this Table Plus is a nice one. Now let's open the terminal and just see all the programs are installed properly. So first, we can just check PHP by saying php-v. That will give us a version number if PHP is installed properly. For MySQL, we can just say mysql-u root, and if MySQL is installed and the service is running, then we would get this, which is kind of going inside the MySQL interface. To exit it, we can just type exit. To make sure that MySQL service is running, if you are on Windows, after installing XAMPP, you just open the program and you have buttons that will say start in front of Apache server and MySQL service. So you just have to make sure those services are started. And for the Mac users, if you just type brew services, it will show you the services that can be run on your machine. So for example, MySQL for me is started already, and that's why I was able to go inside MySQL interface. If it says none for the status, you can just say brew services start and then the name of the package, which is MySQL. Finally, for Composer, you can just type Composer. And if that gave you a logo and a version number like this, that means it is installed and ready to go. So back to Laravel documentation, we can either use this command and this will create a Laravel app with the default values, or we can use the Laravel installer, which is a nice command prompt tool that will ask us questions along the way, and we can set up our program the way we want. So I'm going to use this one, but then again, you can use this one if you wanted to. Let's install the Laravel installer using this command. I already have it installed, but this command will just update it if there is an update. And after installing this, you need to make sure this is in your path. Otherwise, you cannot run this command. So for me, it's already in the path. That's why I can just say Laravel, and it will show me the version number and the commands that I can run. Now, in order to add it to your path, if you are on Windows, you can just search environment path, I believe, and you will have a window where you can just edit or add new path, and I will show you which path you need to add in a moment. And for the Mac users, you can type code and then the name of the file with your path environment variables. For me, for instance, is called ZSHRC. So if you are using Bash, this is probably Bash RC. So for different machines, it's different, so you can find that. And when you press enter, this will open it in VS Code. If you scroll all the way down, this is the path we need to add to this file. So you need to make sure composer, vendor, and bin is in your path, and so you can run Laravel commands. So back to the terminal, if we run a Laravel new command, which is down here, create a new Laravel application, it will give us this nice prompt so we can go through it and install the project. Let's give it a name. So I'm just going to call it my app. We don't need a starter kit at this point. Later on, I will create videos with starter kits. We don't need to worry about testing. So I'm just going to select pest. We don't need a Git repo. And this will go through the first phase of installation. And after that, it will ask us what database we want to use. So again, I'm going to use MySQL, but if you want to use SQLite, it is quite straightforward and quite similar. So let's select MySQL. And because we are choosing MySQL, we need to run our migrations and actually have that database. So this will look for a database in our MySQL connection with the same name as our application. So I called it my app. So if that database exists, it's going to run the migrations. If it doesn't, it's going to create it. So for me, it already existed. So that's why the migrations ran and project is installed. So let's cd into that folder and run php artisan serve. So this will give us a URL and we can just copy it and paste it into our browser. And this is our fresh Laravel program, and you can see the version number down there. Now let's open it in VS Code, and I want to show you something before we get into details. All right, so we installed our program using Laravel installer, right? So if we go to env, because we chose MySQL as our database, under database connections, we have these default values for us set up. However, if you use this command without the Laravel installer, you will have something like this. So these lines will be commented out like this, and up here you would have SQLite, and also if you look at your database folder, you should have this database SQLite. We also have it too, even though we installed it using the Laravel installer. This is just, again, the default database for Laravel 11. All right, so if you want to use SQLite, this is your setup. So you just have to set the connection to SQLite and make sure this database exists, and then you can run the rest of the commands. I'm going to bring these back because we are actually using MySQL. Close this one. We can in fact delete this because we're not going to use it, and so we can continue with our course.